Hello. Welcome to the Portland, Maine Board of Education Finance, Personnel, and Operations Committee meeting of February 9th, 2026. It is 6:01 p.m. and I am calling this meeting to order. My name is Sarah Bryden. I'm the chair of the committee. With us, we have board member Opperman, who is a member of the committee. We have from staff at this point, we have Superintendent Dr. Ryan Scallon. We have Lisa Beck, who is the head of finance, and we have Jennifer Slaybank, who is the head of HR, and we have Heather Peters from the finance team as well. It is 6:02, so we might see some additional squares getting added into the cast of characters as we go, but we shall see. I am going to check and see. Oh, goodness, I have too many windows open, so I'm going to check and see if we have any attendees who might be interested in giving public comment. And I do see somebody with a hand up, which is a sign that I need to read the guidelines for public comment, which will take just a moment. Okay. So for anybody who would like to give public comment, you should be aware that members of the public can speak on any subject directly related to the operations of the school, except for personnel matters or complaints concerning specific employees or students. Those need to be addressed through established policies and procedures. Anybody giving public comment is limited to a maximum of 3 minutes. It's 6 minutes for somebody using an interpreter, and you cannot relinquish a portion of your time to somebody else. Members of the committee are not going to respond to comments. Speakers must refrain from engaging in disruptive conduct, including but not limited to using vulgar or obscene language, threatening others using words or by other actions, using pejorative or discriminatory language with reference to a person or a group on the basis of their religion, ethnicity, nationality, race, color, descent, gender, or other identity factor, making defamatory comments, exceeding the allotted time limits, talking over or interrupting others, offering repetitive comments, offering comment on matters unrelated to the school district's programs, policies, or operations. If there's any public comment that is contrary to these rules, I will close public comment. And once again, if you'd like to give public comment, raise your Zoom hand. Begin by introducing yourself with your name and where you live. I will keep the time and let you know when you are within 30 seconds of the end of your 3 minutes. Also, before we get started, I see that board member Sawtelle is on the attendees list. If we could bring her over as a panelist, that would be super. I see Stephen Scharf, who has a Zoom hand raised. So if we could move him over so he can unmute and give his public comment, I would appreciate that as well. Stephen, go ahead.
Stephen Scharf of Brackett Street in Portland. First, I want to again request that you turn the video into gallery mode so people can see all the people in attendance. And not sure, there's nothing on my end I can do to change that. I am commenting specifically, though, on the enrollment in the schools. I have sent a previous email about enrollment. And other than one member saying that they would look into it, I've heard nothing more about the enrollments in the schools. And I think it's important that you folks are aware of the enrollment. It's part of the finances. And knowing that the enrollment has dropped this year by 380 students, and yet you're looking for more and more money, just makes no sense at all. It's also the superintendent in one email slide at one point referenced an additional 86 next year, which I think will be a much higher number based on certain factors. But I'm going to continue to harp on this enrollment issue until you folks acknowledge it and start publishing enrollment data on a regular basis, like South Portland, Brunswick, and several other local communities do. There's no reason why that information is not published publicly and in a timely manner. It's pretty simple to do. You have the information, and it should be out there for the public to see. And I look forward to the rest of your discussion. I noticed there's no discussion on the FY27 budget in today's agenda, but just noting that. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Stephen. Okay, and also just to confirm, board member Sawtelle has joined us. She is also a member of the committee. Um, and let's see. So I'm going to just take a beat and see if there are any other people who would like to give public comment. I'm not seeing any other Zoom hands. So at this point, I will close public comment and we will take a quick look at what our agenda is going to be for tonight's meeting. We are going to get a discussion or walkthrough of December financials. Lisa Beck is going to walk us through that, I believe. If you, for anybody who has looked at the agenda online, there are two personnel items. Those are informational, not discussion items. The fiscal year 27 budget is going to be part of our discussion tonight. I think the materials have yet to be posted online, but they will be. And then there are four policy review items that we are actually going to table and discuss in an upcoming meeting instead of during today's meeting. So I am going to turn things over to Lisa. Are you the one who's going to be walking us through the December financials?
Yes.
Great. I'm going to go on mute and let you take it away.
All right, sorry, just one moment. I'm getting an error message trying to share the slides.
Lisa, I can put them up for you if you want.
Yeah, if you wouldn't mind. I can't seem to get past the error message.
Yeah, just give me 1 second.
All right, so if we can just go ahead and go to the next slide, please. All right, so we are, this is as of December, so we are halfway through the fiscal year. So if we look at our revenues, the district has collected 78.5 million in revenues, which is 47.3% of our revenues. It's worth noting that the state subsidy for adult ed, which typically in the past has arrived in December, actually arrived in mid-January. So if we add that in, which you'll see in the January financials, it does bring us up to 61% for adult ed and the overall for the district 47.8. So it gets a little closer to that halfway point. If we go to the next slide. Food service received two new grants in December. So Full Plates Full Potential gave a $4,700 grant for equipment. And they also gave a $4,800 grant for from Oakhurst for after school. Grant revenue collected to date is 32% of budget. Again, that's nothing to be concerned about because there is a lag time in actually collecting those, since they're all in a reimbursement model. Running total of new and renewing grants awarded for the fiscal year is 835,000. And the running total of grants that were rolled over from prior year is 2 million. So we can go to the next slide. Here is the table showing the numbers for the highlights that I just gave. And if we go to the next slide, for expenditures, again, they're kind of tracking really right alongside revenue. So the district is at 47.4% of budgeted expenditures for the fiscal year, with grant expenditures being 43% of their budget. Similar to previous months, the percent of budget for contracted services is higher than that for personnel because we continue to have vacancies, most especially in the special ed area. All right, if we go to the next slide. And here are those expenditure numbers by fund. And then if we go to the next slide, this is the view by budgeted category. So this is where you can see that we're slightly over on contracted services and under where we expected to be on personnel due to those vacancies. All right, and then if we go to the next slide. So board policy does require this committee to approve large budget transfers. So tonight we are seeking approval to move 1,153,695 from special education personnel to special education contracted services. Again, we've done this a couple of times now. This is needed to cover where we're using contracted services to cover vacancies for positions that have continued to be difficult to fill. This estimates what we need for the remainder of the year.
Lisa, can I just pause and just ask
Mhm.
two quick questions? I
Yes.
hope they're quick questions. So the first one is whether you can you confirm that my understanding is correct that we would be voting within the committee to move that moving of funds to the full board, and then the full board would then have an opportunity to vote on it as well, correct?
I believe the last one only the committee voted on it, but Dr. Scallon can correct me if I am mistaken.
I think you're right, Lisa,
Mhm.
that we did it at the committee level. The policy is a little vague on who exactly has to. And I would also say that if, because of the dollar amount or for public reasons, we want it to be that it's referred there, I don't think there's anything from stopping you from doing that.
Okay, so it's more of a question of what the policy allows and requires.
Mhm.
Okay. And then my follow-up question is, would you like us to vote on that now, or do you want to get through the rest of your slides and then come back and do the vote?
The remainder of the slides are on FY27, so I would recommend that we vote now and then move on.
Okay, so I will make a motion to, I'm sorry, could you display that slide again? So I can make my motion accurately? Thank you. Thank you so much. So I would make a motion to approve moving $1,153,695 from special education personnel to special education contracted services as outlined by staff. Is there a second? Thank you, Board Member Opperman. And now we will do a vote. Let's see. Board Member Opperman? Yes. Great. Board Member Sawtelle?
Yes.
Thank you. And I am also a yes. So the motion passes unanimously. And now we can move on to FY27, and I will take down my hand.
Chair, do you want to move to FY27 or do you want to do personnel first? I don't think it matters for us. Just on the way the agenda was written, it had.
Yeah. So my understanding when I looked at the agenda was that the personnel items are informational and not discussion. So was there
It would just be to see if there were any questions.
oh, right. Okay. So yeah, let's pause and see if there's any questions about the personnel items on the agenda. Seeing none, I think, yeah, that was a great procedural adherence to the agenda. I appreciate that very much. So now I think we can move on to FY27.
All right. So this, we're going to start out with some historical context just for awareness. So the Portland Public Schools receives revenue from local, state, and federal sources to pay for our programs. And so what we've shown below is over the last 3 fiscal years, what percentage of each of those funding sources was used. So as you can see, it's largely, the largest percent is the local property taxes or the a very small line for the fund balance. The green is your federal, and then there's orange is the state. And then this view on the left shows really what this tells you is that pre-K to 12th is the majority of our funding, with very small slivers then for adult education and food service. And then on the right, as you can see, 78% of our budget goes to salary and benefits. It's a much smaller percent that goes to non-personnel. This table shows the local budget history. So as you can see, it's kind of ranged between 2.1% in 2021 up to 8.6% being the highest in 2024, and a little bit of everything in between, but it's generally stayed around the 5 to 6% range. The city, county, and school district tax rates combine for our overall property tax rate for the residents. So here on the screen, we do have an example for you that shows in the scenario, the 1198 total tax rate comes from 526 for the city, 45 cents from the county, and 6.27 for the tax rate. So this is an example using the FY26 numbers. With limited funding from the state and federal governments, the local property owner has seen increases in their taxes. And so this table shows you the history of the school mill rates and the overall tax levy. So as you can see, the percentage, in 2021 was 1.1%, and it's varied kind of over the years with it being 6.6 in 2026. So you can kind of see how that's changed. So local property tax revenue is a combination of the assessed property value and the mill rate. So the assessed value is the city's determination of the value of your property. The mill rate is the tax rate per $1,000 of assessed value, and the tax levy is the total property tax revenue generated. So if we look at the school portion of the property tax, the total assessed value in FY26 is here, which led to a mill rate in FY26 of $6.27. That tax levy then was 127 million, and we've showed the calculation below. Do want to note this is just for illustrative purposes because due to rounding differences, there will be some slight differences between what the city officially posts. So local property tax revenue is a combination of the assessed property value and the mill rate. We don't yet know what the assessed value will be in FY27. That's not available this early in the year. But based on the current assessment, a 1% increase in mill rate is 1.2 million in additional revenue, or $35.53 in additional tax for the homeowner of a 566,600 house, which is kind of the median. Unlike the city, the district does not have the ability to raise significant funding outside of the property taxes. So the below chart shows how property taxes impact the tax levy and the homeowner. So it shows for each percentage of increase what that mill rate looks like and what the impact is to the homeowner. So as a reminder, the state has a very complex funding formula that considers enrollment, cost of education, and the city's ability to pay. So it's called the EPS, or Essential Programs and Services formula. It consists of two main parts. The first is your operating allocation. So that's your cost of your education to provide an equitable education in any given district. Then they calculate the local contribution, which is the amount of the district's own resources it should contribute to the cost of education. So when you take operating allocation minus local contribution, it equals the state subsidy. And the key drivers of the operating allocation are enrollment and demographics, admin and personnel costs, and any changes to the formula itself. The key drivers for the local contribution piece is the property tax valuation and the mill rate. And local contribution is your EPS value times your EPS mill rate. All right, so that was a lot of background information to explain how the state funding is calculated. And so now we can talk about what the state funding is for FY27. So we recently received the ED 279 from the state that shows our funding, and we are seeing a $4.1 million reduction in the state funding. And really the reasons for that are one, changes in cost of programming. So in there's a 2.8% decrease in our 2-year running average enrollment of students. There's an 8% decrease in our multilingual learners, a 2.7% decrease in economic disadvantaged students. And then we do have some debt service that's come to an end. So that's decreased by $423,700. And then lastly, the changes in the local contribution is we've seen a 15% increase in our property valuation. So all of those changes have led to this decision or the calculation that we would receive 4.1 million less in state funding.
Lisa, can I jump in here and just add a couple things?
Yes. Mhm.
And thank you for this. The decrease in reimbursed debt service. So for our schools that were built with state funding and state reimbursement, the Hall School, Row would be a good example of that. We get reimbursed for the vast majority of that school. So we carry the debt. And at one point, the taxpayers would have voted on that bond. And every year, the state reimburses us. And as you think about your own debt service payments around a mortgage, et cetera, some of that is now reduced. And so that 423,000 is not really a reduction by the state. It's recognizing that we have a $423,000 less payment. And so we're just matching up dollars to dollars there. So that's not actually a significant loss because on the flip side, we're paying less. The significant driver here is actually not enrollment. It's the change in property valuation. And so the state was kind enough to look at what our state funding would be for next year if the valuation had stayed the same. And it would have been $7.8 million higher than it was last year. And instead, it's $4 million lower. And it's because the property valuation that the state has for us is a 3-year trailing average, and it goes up by $2 billion next year. And so that $2 billion increase is what is driving the change in what we see in valuation. And so it is that change in the local contribution. One of the things that I think, the person who gave public comment before, Mr. Scharf, will be excited about is that tomorrow we will be sharing enrollment trends, and you will be able to see the impact that enrollment has had and the change over the last 8 years. And it is down. One of the hard things, and we'll talk about this in a little bit, one of the hard things is that when we see a reduction in students, they don't all sit in one classroom. And so when we have a reduction in students, it's across 16 schools and across, a couple hundred classrooms. And so it's harder to do a one-to-one. For every student you lose this percent of a teacher because our costs don't go down in the same exact ratio. And so just want to acknowledge that. And so actually the $4 million reduction here is pretty significant in terms of how it'll force us to think about our budget. And looks like you have a question, Chair Brighton.
Yeah, thanks. Before we move on, I just had two quick, I don't want to say clarification questions, but 2 points from Lisa's very clear information that I wanted to confirm my understanding of, and also so that anybody who's either watching us online or watches the recording later has a really clear understanding of in terms of some of that historical context. And I just want to make sure that I'm understanding correctly, the ability to pay component of that formula at the state level am I correct in thinking that when we say ability to pay, the state is, that's really the property valuation? It's not actually, even though ability to pay feels like, oh, the actual ability of Portlanders to pay these taxes, it's not tied to income, it's not tied to anything like that. It's just tied to property valuation, correct?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you. And then the other piece that I think that I just wanted to really highlight and make really, really clear. That first slide was so helpful in terms of the percentage of federal, state, and property tax funding, with the state, I think, being at 16 yeah. Yes, that one. So, because I think that in a lot of community conversations that I've heard over the last couple of years, there's a talking point that's really sticking for people in their memories, and it really resonates. The idea that the state funds 55% of education. And I just want to clarify, correct me if I'm wrong, but the 55% of education funding is statewide. So Portland is not getting 55% of our budget from the state. Some districts are getting more than that. We are getting much less. Is that a correct summary as well?
That is correct. And it has to do with that second factor of the state's perceived local ability to pay. And
Mm-hmm,
so it's offset. So the way the state does it is it takes all of what they estimate the cost to be,
mm-hmm,
and they divide the property value across the whole state
mm-hmm,
by how much does it cost. And that gets them the mill rate.
mm-hmm,
And then it's not a real mill rate. It's not the mill rate we use, but it allows them to then say, all right, here's what it would need to be for the state as a whole to cover
mm-hmm,
55%.
mm-hmm,
And so that's what it does. And so, yes, and it's what actually results in our district being the largest district and the most diverse district in the state, receiving next year $19 million once you include debt service and other reimbursements. And a district like Gorham, a much smaller district, receiving 24, $26 million, and Lewiston receiving $76 million.
okay.
Yep.
Thank you for that context. Board Member Sawtelle, go ahead.
What's the explanation behind the decrease in federal funding?
I think there's two things there. The biggest from FY24 to FY25 is COVID funds. And so in that year, you see that jump in local taxes. It was local owners, property owners taking on what was getting paid for with COVID. The more recent is that for each of the last couple of years, we've estimated that we'll get about 95% of the title funding that we received the previous year. So those are the grants that go towards uh, low income, multilingual learners, teacher professional development. And so we've seen that the reimbursement there is about 95% the last couple years compared to the year before. So it's not as big, but that's what's happening there. Sorry, Lisa, I'll turn it back to you.
Yeah, thank you for your patience with our questions.
No, of course. All right. So this chart just shows the change in the state funding portion of our budget over the years. So you can see it's a considerable percentage difference from year to year. But this year, with that $4 million increase or decrease, it would actually be an 18.17% decrease there. And I think there we go. So this just shows then kind of the changes that we expect. So it's a anticipated reduction of 4.1 million in the orange, which is the state funding. As Dr. Schellen already called out, we are anticipating 130,000 less in our federal funding because we are estimating that we will receive about 95% of what we received for FY26 in the ESEA grants. So with those two going down, the percentage of local taxes will have to increase in order to offset those reductions, so that we can continue to cover the cost of inflation, contractual salary increases, and other desired increases that we need to make must be offset with the local property taxes. All right. So in terms of the next steps for the FY27 budget, we are continuing to review with our executive cabinet in order to work toward the recommendation that will be presented to the board. We're reviewing any requests for new investments, in light of the reduction in funding. We would anticipate those being very minimal that we can support, but we are looking at those to see which ones might need to be supported. In light of the state funding reduction, we have implemented a hiring freeze, excluding classroom teachers, to review all vacancies to determine if any of those positions could be left unfilled in order to help us offset this 4.1 million in reduction. So that work is ongoing. We've also held many of the departments to a flat budget year over year. The schools are largely flat, other than we did, as we previously discussed, to increase supplies for the schools. So all of that's still kind of being worked on, and we'll have an update for this committee on February 23rd at our next meeting. And then if we can go to the next slide, I've just mapped out here the important dates happening over the next 2 months. We have aligned with the city on the calendar. So tomorrow, February 10th, is our public forum on the FY 2027 budget. This committee is meeting again on the 23rd, and then on the 26th, the City Finance Committee is meeting on CIP, which is your capital improvement plan. March 2nd, City Council first read of CIP. Then on March 10th, the superintendent presents the recommended budget to the school board. On March 16th, the City Council has a second read on their capital improvement plan. March 23rd is when this committee would have to vote to send the budget to the full board for approval. And then March 26th is the first of two joint city and school finance committee meetings. And then March 31st is the first reading of the recommended budget and the public hearing with the full board. So just so you have, those are the next 2 months worth of dates, and we'll continue to share that. It's also, I will say, the full timeline is now posted on the PPS website. Right. And that is my last slide. Any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I do see that Board Member Opperman does, so go ahead.
Well, I think I want to thank you for going through all that very well and very clear. EPSs, and I think people have problem with EPS. People at EPS have problem with EPS. So I think that, having looked at that for over 10 years, it is unbelievably difficult. And I would urge members of the committee and the public to keep an eye out for any possible adjustments to that programming, that calculation. I talked to someone today about that, and it can be changed. So we need to push for that. And I also think I anticipate in the next couple of years we need to really readjust some of what we have in our programming, and how not so much. My big concern as a curriculum person is to say, whatever we do, it shouldn't be hurting the students. We need to make sure that we're giving a better program with less money. And so I think that sounds absurd, perhaps in kind of the logic way, but it's possible. And so I think we need to look at that seriously. So thank you, Chair. That's my 2 cents for the evening on this topic.
Thank you, Board Member Opperman. Yes, so thank you so much, Lisa, for that. Not necessarily uplifting presentation, but very informative and clear presentation, really important context. And um, I don't sort of echo and dovetail with what Board Member Opperman was saying. Just the importance of, as a community, investing in education and giving students what they need to be successful. It costs money, and we need to also be really good stewards of those resources, and get the most out of those dollars that we can. So it'll be a fun several meetings ahead, as we do that work. All right. I also want to just check and see if there are any other people who have comments, questions, anything else to add to that budget conversation. Okay. As I mentioned at the top of the meeting, the policy review items are going to be moved to another meeting. So I believe we've reached the end of our agenda, and I will take a beat and see if there's anybody who has anything else they'd like to say before we move to adjourn. And Board Member Opperman, were you wanting to say something else, or are you going to move to adjourn? I will
I will
let you
vote, but before we
go ahead.
adjourn, I want to say that I hope people who are listening to this or viewing this and seeing also look at the other committee work that doing, such as the legislative committee, the curriculum committee, and all, which is where we've been talking about numbers for some time, and the policy committee. So I urge
Mhm.
people to look at those to see what's behind these dollars, because I think that's necessary. Thank you.
No, that's a great point. It's all
I
connected.
move we adjourn for the evening.
And I'd be looking for a second. Wonderful. Thank you, Board Member Sawtelle. Show of hands from the committee members for adjournment. It is unanimous, and we are adjourning at 6:38 p.m. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful rest of your evening. Bye.
Thank
Thank
you.